Hi, everybody! Welcome to the first episode of From the Peanut Gallery. I am Reverend Bogey, massive Padres fan and just an overall sports lunatic. We'll talk about baseball, hockey, footy, and anything else that pops into my head about sports. Some of it will be scripted, some of it I'm just going to react and go off the top of my head. So let's enjoy today's topic. Today, we are diving into my second favorite sport, hockey, and more specifically, the National Hockey League and their current standings format. Back in the old days, and I mean old, like disco old, when I was a teenager, the NHL didn't have overtime. Games ended in ties, and the teams would get 1 point each. So unsatisfying, but simpler times, when we kids could free roam the neighborhood and be home by the time the streetlight came on. Fans became unhappy with ties. Why spend my money and not see a winner? So the NHL started experimenting. In 1983, the NHL brought in overtime after a 40-year hiatus to try to reduce the number of tie games. It was 5-on-5 for 5 minutes, and the game still ended in a tie if no goals were scored. The league adopted the loser point in 1999 to incentivize teams to stop playing for ties and changed the OT to 4-on-4 because teams were still playing for a tie. However, this did not bring about an end to the tie game. Starting in 2005, after the lost season, the NHL implemented the shootout, which eliminated ties, and fans were happy to see a winner. And in 2015, the NHL switched to 3-on-3. Kind of a small controversy. So what do we do about it? Over the last several years, some hockey pundits and fans have been asking for the NHL to change to a 3-point game. 3 points for a win, 2 for an overtime or shootout win, 1 for an overtime or shootout loss, and no points for losing in regulation. This makes sense, yes? Not to the National Hockey League. The purists like the standings the way they are, but today I'm going to show you that the 3-point game changes the standings and brings your points percentage more in line with the team's actual winning percentages. It also shakes up the playoff picture in several different ways. So let's get started. Here is our spreadsheet data for today's show. The current NHL format is on the left, the 3-point format is on the right. This is the end of season data, so all positions are locked, including the playoff spots. First, let's work with the current standings. We'll start with the Eastern Conference. The Buffalo Sabres win the Atlantic Division with 109 points and make the playoffs for the first time in forever. Amazing season for them. Tampa Bay and Montreal tied with 106 points, but the Lightning had more regulation wins with 40 to the Canadiens' 34, so they get second place via the tiebreaker. Now for the Metro. Carolina wins the division with 113 points and clinches the Eastern Conference's best record, giving them the #1 seed for the Eastern playoffs. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia finished in the same situation as Tampa Bay and the Habs, with Pittsburgh getting second place with more regulation wins, 34-27. Wildcard spots go to the Boston Bruins and the Ottawa Senators, so the playoffs in the Eastern Conference have #1 Carolina against #8 Ottawa, #2 Buffalo against #7 Boston, Tampa Bay plays Montreal, and Pittsburgh plays Philadelphia. Over to the Western Conference, shall we? Colorado wins the Central Division and the President's Trophy for the NHL's best record. They were, by far, the best team in the National Hockey League this season, and they should be able to break the President's Trophy curse. Dallas finished second, and Minnesota third. Connor McDavid's words here, in the pillow fight that was the Pacific Division, Vegas won the division with a whole 95 points. I don't think that got anybody in the playoffs last season, just to show how embarrassing that is. Edmonton almost got the division with 93 points, and Anaheim rounds out the top 3. The Utah Mammoth, love the Zammoth. Their Zamboni is awesome if you haven't seen it. And my favorite team, the Los Angeles Kings, are the wild card teams. So Colorado plays the Kings, Vegas plays Utah, Dallas and Minnesota go at it, and Edmonton and Anaheim finish the first round. But should it really be this way? Should a team with 47 losses in 82 games be in the playoffs? Should another team miss the playoffs, even though they won 10 more games in regulation than the team that got that spot? The 3-point game says otherwise. Before we look at the 3-point data, please, if you're enjoying this, like and subscribe to these videos. You may think I'm talking out of my backside about this and other things, but there's always a method to my madness. We'll start with the Eastern Conference again for consistency. Buffalo, Tampa Bay, and Montreal stay in their positions, but look at the point spread there. Even though Buffalo and Tampa Bay both won 50 games, Buffalo had 42 regulation wins to Tampa Bay's 40. Good enough for an extra 2 points. Plus their overtime losses of 9-6 give the Sabres a 5-point cushion. Montreal, tied with the Lightning in the current format, finished 6 points behind. Another switch affects the wild card, as Ottawa and Boston swapped 4th and 5th place in the division because even though Boston won 45 games to the Sens 44, Ottawa had 38 regulation wins to Boston's 33. It makes a big difference, no? Let's go to the Metro, where things start getting crazy. Carolina still wins the division and has the best record in the conference by 1 point instead of 4. Why? Regulation wins and overtime losses brought Buffalo really close to winning the conference. Change one of those overtime losses to a win, and Buffalo wins the Eastern Conference instead of Carolina. Remember in the current format how Pittsburgh and Philly ended up 2-3 in the division? No dice when it comes to the 3-point game. They each drop a position because the Washington Capitals, with their 37 regulation wins and 132 points, jump the queue and take the second spot, knocking Philly out of the playoffs. OV plays on. That's crazy talk, you say. But if the Flyers saw the importance of winning in regulation with the extra point, maybe they do something crazy these last 2 weeks of the season, like pushing harder for a 60-minute win or yanking the goalie in a tie game just to get that extra point. Chaos hockey! Playoffs end up Carolina and Boston, Buffalo and Ottawa, Lightning and Habs, and the Penguins and Caps. Actually, the Central Division pretty much stays the same, with Colorado winning and taking the President's Trophy, and Dallas and Minnesota go 2-3. In the Pacific, Edmonton wins the pillow fight by the regulation win tiebreaker over Vegas 32-30, and Anaheim stays in third place with 118 points. Now the fun part. The wild cards go to Utah and St. Louis. They are not singing the blues in Missouri because their 119 points were enough to get them into a series with the Avalanche. Dallas still gets Minnesota, the Oilers now play Utah, and Vegas get with Anaheim. Because, and stick with me here, what of the Los Angeles Kings, you ask? Well, let's talk about them falling 3 spots to 11th in the conference behind Nashville and San Jose. How did that happen? As with most of the Pacific Division, and I'm looking at you, Vancouver, the Kings were brutally bad. They were awful. They won 35 and lost 47, a .426 winning percentage by straight record, and a .455 points percentage under the 3-point game. All fine and dandy under those 20 loser points in the current system, but that does not fly today. Of their 35 wins, the Kings won 13 of them in overtime or a shootout. That's 13 points they lost because they could not finish in regulation. Win 6 of those 13, and the Kings finished 3rd in the division. Now, I'd love to do a full analysis of their season, how it was doomed from the start because of some decisions made by Ken Holland, first of which was keeping coach Jim Hiller after last season's debacle against Edmonton, then keeping him through the holidays and the Olympic break, and a couple of very slow D-men that were signed, but that's for after they get slaughtered by Colorado. The point is, the record shows they do not belong in the Stanley Cup playoffs this season, nor do the Philadelphia Flyers, because Washington is clearly the superior team, finishing off 37 of their 43 wins in 60 minutes. So what does this really all mean? Commissioner Gary Bettman has already said the 3-point game won't happen because purity and tradition. But I think it's got to become reality. Teams should be rewarded more for winning in regulation than teams that win via overtime or shootout because they finished off teams in the old ways, 5-on-5, not in a gimmick 3-on-3 or in a skills competition like the shootout. Teams that lose in overtime and shootouts should still get their loser point, but they should lose more ground to teams that win in regulation. I believe that teams will put more effort into winning in regulation with the extra point on the line, especially if the playoffs are in reach or they are in danger. Can you imagine teams pushing for the playoffs, going all Patrick Waugh, pulling the goalie in a tie game, throwing out 5 forwards late in the game because they have to get that extra point? Lunacy, chaos, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Sorry. But tell me what you think. Is this something the NHL should seriously consider? Do the current rules reward the best teams, or would a 3-point game make more sense? Feel free to comment below. Please keep it clean and on the topic. Subscribe and like, and most of all, thank you for watching. I'll try and pump out more of these when I can. Well, until then, you all have a great day, and I hope to talk to you soon. Thanks.